In this video, I'm going to be talking about what I've dubbed advanced tuning techniques and concepts. They're not really advanced, I just mean that they're different from your typical tuning concepts, such as like oversized and undersized bushings and sanding bushings. There's already plenty of videos out there about those. This is going to be about different factors that are less talked about that could be affecting the tune of your balisong. I'm going to be focusing on reps today just because A, reps are notorious for having finicky tunes, and B, a lot of people have a lot of rep builds, and people ask me about how I tune them and maintain them, okay? So I'm going to split this video roughly into 3 parts. The first part is just going to be talking about like why you might have play in a balisong that has an otherwise good tune, okay? Then I'm going to be talking about a easy modification, easy and cheap, about $15 total, modification that you can do to your reps and other sandwich balisongs called a thick kit modification with floating washers that you can do to fix the tap in your balisong. And finally, I might talk a little bit at the end about other reasons that you might have a bad tune other than just your bushings being oversized or undersized, right? So what do I mean by good tune and bad tune? I'll start there. By good tune, I mean that like if you crank your pivots tight as you can and you crank your Zen pins and everything is super tight, then you will still have, you know, free swing, good bounce, and so this has good bounce and relatively minimal handle play, right? So this has a very good tune. By bad tune, I just mean that when you crank the pivots down all the way, you either might get some binding in your handles where they won't swing freely, or you'll have a lot of play. Now, you know, I think I demonstrated as a demonstration of a balisong that has good tune and still has tap. This has a good tune, but you can hear that it has a little bit of tap. On the other side, this is another custom rep that I have. I'm going to talk about all of my custom reps in a future video, by the way, but there's another custom rep I have which also has free swing and a very cool sound, by the way, but it has way more handle play, right? So this has a worse tune. This rep has a worse tune than this rep, but no tap, okay? So I'll show you how I can achieve that later in this video with a thick kit mod. But we're going to talk first of all about some reasons why a balisong with a good tune might have tap. So just as a reminder of what causes tap and why you might not want it, what causes tap is just the blade hitting against the inside of the channel. So this is the channel of the handle, and this is the blade, and you can hear that when you wiggle the blade back and forth, it hits the inside of the channel, and that's what causes your tap, right? So there are a number of reasons why you might have an otherwise good tune and still have tap. The first thing that you should probably check is just that your balisong is lubed properly with a good thick oil. If your balisong is over 4 ounces, you should use a thick oil, and that oil does a lot of the work in filling up the gap between your washers and your blade. It's a tiny, infinitesimally small gap between your washers and your blade. The oil fills that up, and so the blade doesn't wiggle as much, right? The second thing to do is to check if your blade is centered. So here is another, custom rep with a good tune. Very bouncy, very minimal blade play. Handle play, very minimal handle play, but it does have some tap, okay? So the first thing to do is check. By the way, most of the time with a live blade at least, you're not gonna have tap in the bite handle because the blade side of your blade, the sharp side of your blade is much thinner, so there's a lot more space for it to wiggle back and forth inside the channel without hitting the inside of the channel. Your tap is almost always going to be on your safe side, which it is in this case, because the spine of your blade is thicker, so there's less space in between for it to wiggle around without hitting the handle. Now, one thing I'm noticing though is like, so the first thing you should check to see is if your blade is centered. So I'm going to see if this blade is hitting both sides of the channel or if it's just hitting one side. I'll tap it. So it is hitting this side. If I tap it the other way, it doesn't hit this side. So what that means is that this blade is not centered. It is actually sort of, it's sort of stuck a little closer to this side of the handle than the other side. So there's a very easy fix for that. If that is your problem, all you have to do is sort of pull your blade back like this. Remember, it was tapping this side, so I'm going to push the blade this way so that, or actually, the better way of thinking about this is I'm going to push the handle this way, right? And that will move the blade closer to the center. And now, there's no tap. So that was a very easy fix, right? And it still has a good tune. I didn't have to change anything with the bushings. I didn't have to, what do you call it, like sand bushings or anything like that, right? Sanding bushings is really not something you should do unless you have a lot of handle play, okay? Going back to this one though, this one, I can tell that, but I'll show you that I have tap on both sides. So if I tap it that way, there's tap. If I tap it that way, there's tap, right? So this is hitting both sides of the channel, okay? One of the reasons is because this blade is very thick, right? It's a thick trainer blade, on both sides. The other reason, though, is because rep channels are very thin, and I will show you to compare. This is a Seraph. Seraph is a very high-end knife by Machine Wise, so it does have a very good tune. But even if it didn't have a very good tune, it probably wouldn't tap as much as this rep because you can see that the channel in the Seraph is much, much larger than the channel in the rep, right? So I can, this blade is much thinner relative to the channel size than this rep blade. So there's a lot of room for this blade to wiggle back and forth without hitting the inside of this channel. Whereas here, you can see that there's very, very little space in between the channel and the blade. I don't know if you can see that on camera. But yes, very little space, so it just hits really easily. So how can you fix this? Well, there's two ways. I mean, one, you can manipulate the width of the blade. You can get a thinner blade. There are thinner blades. Blades do come in different sizes. The rep blades made by the clone manufacturer, are thinner, and therefore, so like this one, for example, is the one clone blade that was reground by Andrew Myers, but this is thinner. So these two reps have the same channel size, right? The same 0.157 channel size. I'll get to that in a minute. But this blade is actually thinner. This is a 3mm blade, whereas this is 3.2. So so there's more space, if you can see, in between the blade and the sides of the handle in this channel, even though this channel is the same size as this channel, right? However, if you can't really manipulate the size of the blade. You just have to get a new blade, right? So if you don't want to get a new blade, the other thing that you can manipulate is the size of the channel. And that's what we're going to be doing today with what's called a thick kit.